Yeah. Pro Fan Sports Podcast. Let's get it. Pro fans, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam. John on the mic, very flat too. Keep you updated, that's what we do. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam.
Yo, what it do, everybody? It's your boy John Altidor with Pro Fan Sports Podcast, back at you with another one with my boys, Barry. Vlad couldn't join us tonight, but hopefully next week he is here. But today, we got a special guest. It's not every day we have a doctor on the show, but today we got managing editor for USA Today Celtics Wire, Dr. Justin Quinn. Man, welcome to the show. How you doing?
How's it going? I'm pretty good. Don't ask me medical questions. I'm a doctor of anthropology, if that helps.
Hey, like we were saying, anybody who goes through that deserves it. So congrats to you. And we'll gladly call you doctor around here.
For sure, yeah. That's definitely what we're gonna refer to him as on the podcast today, without a question. Definitely well deserved, and thank you so much for coming on Pro Fan Sports Podcast and for your time. We greatly appreciate having you on here.
Now, Doc, 2023 NBA playoffs just kicked off over the past weekend, man. We saw some really good ball games, and we saw the Celtics come out blazing, going up as much as 30, and looks like they did what they did sometimes during the league, by relinquishing at least half those points. But, a win's a win, and we're going to take it. How are you feeling about the first game against the Hawks? How Coach Mazzulla, did in his first coaching gig, and how the team, had started off?
Let me start with Joe. I think Joe did pretty well. Judicious but effective use of timeouts. He didn't make any particularly obvious mistakes that people have been after him all season long. And generally, I thought that for a playoff debut, it went about as well as you could hope, particularly against someone as experienced as Quinn Snyder on the other side of the court. And the team itself, I think they played pretty well. I think it was on the Anything is Potable podcast over on The Athletic with Jay King and Jan Packard. They had a regular guest on who said that the game itself was a microcosm of the season, which I thought was really, really accurate, right? Because they started kicking posteriors judiciously, very impressively to start the game. And then at halftime, they kind of let go of the rope, as they did around the halfway point of the season. Yeah. And now that we are looking back at the end of the regular season, they finished fairly strong, not as strong as we would have maybe hoped, but had they maintained the level of, say, like what we saw in the last, like maybe half of the fourth quarter throughout the whole game, it would have been a much less nerve-wracking product, right? Because the thing I was afraid of, my expectations of this series was hoping for a 5-game gentleman's sweep, but I was worried because of that second half of the season where they would lose games to like the Oklahoma City Thunder or the Houston Rockets or other teams that they didn't look at as a real threat to themselves. I was worried that they were going to end up dropping a game or two like that. Like, never any concern about losing the series, just that they might end up in a situation where Atlanta gets a home game bump and manages to pull out a win there, plus another game from underestimating the Hawks. And for a little bit in the second half, it looked like that might be what happened, but they really put their foot down and said, nope, we're not doing that this time. A couple of Al Horford three-pointers basically shut off that push by the Hawks. And as of now, I think we're looking at like a 5-game series.
Oh, so you don't see sweeping? You don't think we can take it
on the table
and give them a clean sweep?
It's on the table, but what I saw is an awareness of their game kind of getting away from them in the second half. And I saw an ability to do something about that, but we also saw that in the first half, like the Hawks, the defense was always the problem with the Hawks. Like their offense is one of the top offenses in the league, but the defense is very, very bad. And they're particularly ill-suited to stop scoring wings, which the Celtics have the best pair. Well, not even argue. They have the best pair in the league.
In the league, no question. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be not overly homerish here, but they do.
Right. No, I hear you.
Yeah, so like the way that I'm looking at this series now is the Hawks are going to almost certainly play better, and probably in game 2, definitely on their home court. So there is still a very strong possibility they're going to get everything right one game and catch the Celtics sleeping at the wheel just enough. But yeah, I think a sweep is on the table. I would prefer a sweep. I'd prefer as much time for Jaylen Brown's hand to get into the best possible shape it can. To the point where I'm even a little concerned from what I've been hearing from the people. I'm based in Mexico City, so I rely on like my co-host for Celtics Lab, Cam Tabatabai, and other beat writers to give me what's actually going on in person. And from what I'm hearing, the hand injury is not as bad as what people were concerned about, that ripped open in game 1, and that he's gotten no new stitches. It's just been treated, and there's some images of him practicing that don't look particularly alarming or anything like that. So at first I thought it might be a good idea for him to sit for game 2, because they look like a team that could definitely be able to beat the Hawks even without Jaylen Brown, as long as they focus. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be an issue now. So hopefully no more injuries. We saw lots of them around the other games going on the last couple of days.
For sure, we sure have. And we definitely don't need any injuries for the Celtics, because we've had our fair share over the past years, especially in the playoffs. So hopefully this postseason run, we don't
Jaylen in the hand last, yeah.
Right. I know, yeah, exactly. Hopefully that goes away soon, and and he's able to recover from that quickly.
I mean, with that being said, what are your concerns about the team's overall health and how they went into the postseason?
Well, that is the key right there that you just finished with, into the postseason. The biggest critique I have personally of Joe Mazzulla, and I am not an NBA coach, and he can forget more than I know about NBA basketball coaching. So who am I to critique? But I'm not the only person who is critical of how many minutes he's been playing, particularly injury-prone players. Players who are absolutely critical to the team, in like Robert Williams and like Al Horford and Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum, we haven't been talking about his wrist, but that is still an issue as far as I know. We haven't been hearing about it, which is probably intentional, because if you talk about an injury, as much as you like to think of it as a noble brotherhood out there on the court, people take swipes at whatever is hurting because it will help them. It's dirty, but it's allowed as long as it's accidental. So we haven't been hearing about that. Fatigue for Tatum was also a pretty major issue in the finals last season. And, it looks, we can't say for sure yet about the path, but it looks like the path to the finals is going to be a little bit easier this year, particularly, as I said, some of the potential opponents getting dinged up on the way, battling each other. We don't want to wish for injury, obviously, but it happens. It's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen to your team, then it's a little bit, better from your perspective. So I'm a little bit concerned with the amount of minutes that were being played by star players and how the team's inability to put teams, particularly teams that definitely should be, away earlier, that has put a lot of mileage, combined with the fact that the Celtics couldn't get rid of the interim title until they dealt with the Ime Udoka situation for Joe Mazzulla, which meant that even if they told him he's fine, he was still technically coaching for his job, right?
Yeah.
And if you're coaching for your job, you don't want to lose games. So like all these things are like working against each other, right? So it seems with the week off and the space between games that we're seeing early in the postseason, that things are going better than anticipated in terms of having some rest for these guys. if they can finish this series off with a sweep, that would be fantastic in that regard too, because really Jason Tatum in particular, above anybody else, really needs that rest.
Yeah, he certainly does. I mean, he played a lot of minutes this year, as he does every year. And I feel like they did a decent job in terms of, trying to find those games to, load managing him and getting him his rest and making sure at least he, is able to, sit for some games so that he's not too fatigued and doesn't get too, worn down, as we saw last year. I think they, did all right with that. I mean, maybe they could have rested him a few more games, but, he, certainly likes to play and be out there and, wants to be there for the team, as much as possible. So, I mean, certainly can't blame for that, but that's definitely something to keep in mind, moving forward. Now, I want to ask you, who do you think is, the biggest threat in the East and to the Celtics in a matchup that could really give, the Celtics a run for their money in the playoffs?
Whew, that's a tough one. If you had asked me as recently as yesterday morning, I might have said to you the Milwaukee Bucks, because I still kind of think they are, but they just lost to the Miami Heat. Giannis bruised the crap out of his posterior, speaking of.
Oh, yeah.
And like his x-rays came back negative, thank goodness. He's looking like he's going to be able to play in game 2. But if anything happens to him, then they are like, maybe the equivalent of a 7th or 6th seed team, maybe. I mean, they're a good team, don't get me wrong.
He's that low?
He's so important to what they do. I mean, who is going to be? It's like Drew and Chris Middleton, who is very much not himself lately, even playing much better recently.
Yeah,
those are your scorers. I mean, they're not bad, but they're not exactly like lights out shooters this season. Anyway.
They're not the consistent guys.
Yeah.
And
what about guys like Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis, who always seem to step up and play well, in the playoffs and, play, with a lot of, energy and intensity?
So again, I think that somewhere in the neighborhood of like a Knicks Cavs level team is what we're looking at without Giannis. So right in the middle of the pack, too, maybe even a little below that, depending on how well Chris Middleton actually plays this postseason. I didn't get a chance to actually watch the Miami Heat game, but he has not looked particularly great. He looked, good, but he's not like the Celtics killer that he has been, for example, in recent games.
No, you're right.
So for me right now, I'm actually starting to think that the 76ers are potentially the biggest threat, which let's not gloat, right? Because MVP candidate probably is going to win it at the helm of the team. And they have been steamrolling teams in the same sort of way that the Bucks have been steamrolling teams. But the reason why I'm pretty excited about this scenario is not just because we've seen that the Celtics have about as good of a formula as anyone to beat Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers, but also because both of those teams pushed like the Celtics did last season, right? And the Bucks, they had some time to rest a little bit more than the 76ers, but in both cases, they pushed way harder than the Celtics to finish their season. And I think that all of this is part of I think that's part of the reason why the Bucks lost last night to the Heat, for example. I think that the 76ers, they're not going to find their current situation particularly easy either in the postseason. So when the Sixers and the Celtics do end up playing, because I'm almost certain, I don't think I'm being very wild by predicting that matchup. I think that the biggest threat may still be the 76ers. And I think the Sixers are not particularly well positioned to get past the Celtics. I think they can push the series to 7 games even, but I would be utterly flabbergasted if they actually beat the Celtics.
Yeah. I mean, they had a tough time beating the team without Jaylen Brown on them. on the court the last
And
game.
Rob Williams too, no Time Lord,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
right.
Time Lord, you know, so
52 points from Embiid, and they barely beat the Celtics. I mean, like,
Right, exactly. Yeah,
that was an awesome game by him.
one by one
yeah, that was
possession.
fun.
Exactly right. They almost choked it and gave it away. Right, right. I know it's like no matter how well Embiid plays, it seems like they always find like ways to lose and ways to like give away games to other teams. That they should win. So it's like, yeah, it's hard to imagine them beating a healthy Celtics team, even when Embiid's playing at their best, because I don't think they have enough, around and outside of Joel Embiid, even, as great as he's been this year. Like, even if he drops 40 and 10 and has an incredible and spectacular series, I don't think it'll be enough to beat the Celtics with as deep as they are and, as well balanced as, this team really is. It's, a guy going 40 and 10 is not going to be enough. One guy's not going to beat this team.
In fact, I think it reminds me a lot of another Philadelphia big man from way back in the day that the Celtics used to face. And the approach that the Celtics seem to have, it's nowhere near on the level. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Joel Embiid is Wilt Chamberlain, but the approach is very similar. You let him get his, and you shut everyone else off.
Yeah.
Good point, for sure.
Sure.
Approach.
I mean, hopefully the Celtics do what they do, and I am confident that 76ers will probably get through in their series as well. And, these guys will meet when they meet. As of right now, though, I was talking about Joe Mazzulla earlier, and it seemed like he shortened the rotation a bit, starting right off the bat in the first game. What'd you think about the rotations he had out there?
Well, I'm a little surprised I should say, now that from what I was saying earlier about the interim thing, it probably shouldn't surprise me that he's really hardwired to win, to the point where it's almost a problem in like a Michael Jordan running the Charlotte Hornets kind of a way, where like he gets it in his own way. He wants to win so much that he doesn't do the things that are important that don't involve winning, like resting players sometimes. But in terms of rotations, no Grant. That was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
The shortening of the rotation, I expected it, but I kind of expected, given the caliber of opponent that the Hawks are, that they would play a little bit more, maybe let a couple other people into the rotation that didn't make it in. I don't have a problem with it necessarily, because the other line of that thinking is if you don't know what you have by now, then you might be in a lot of trouble if you want to win a title. So maybe he's comfortable with what he has, and really just the goal is to get the game won as easily and as quickly as possible, to move and advance as quickly as possible to get that rest. And if that was the thinking, I totally get it. Me personally, I would have played just a little bit more, particularly when that lead was huge, with some of the guys that you're not really going to play later on in the series, just to see if you find something interesting.
Hey, hopefully he'll hear this podcast and he'll make
I hope he doesn't take advice from us.
After all, we do have a doctor on the show. You know what I'm saying? So
I can give him advice on anthropology he should listen to. I don't know about rotations. That's my opinion.
We've gotten pretty lucky around here with the two guys that are leading the team in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Jason Tatum's a surefire first team All NBA this year. He led the league in points. Do you think that Jaylen Brown should be right behind him? Because I feel like Jaylen Brown is in the top 10 in the NBA this year.
I was thinking of a question I wanted to ask you as you were formulating that, and I'm going to ask you my question because I think it will give you my answer.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 5 games, maybe even 10 games the Celtics have played, who's been the better player?
Jaylen Brown.
JB.
I'm not saying he's always the better player. Over the course of the season, he has not been the better player. He does not demand the same kind of attention from defenses. He has more weaknesses in his game. But in terms of his focus and his intensity and his effectiveness, so far, I think that Jaylen Brown deserves to be in the All-NBA conversation without a doubt. It may not pan out for him. I think it will, but it may not pan out for him because of positional issues. But in terms of it's not like a 1A and 1B kind of a thing. I think they're very close to being equals. They just have different specialties, and Tatum has slightly less weaknesses. It's a lot harder to attack his dribble, for example, is just one of the more obvious things.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that they complement each other very well, and the really the only knock on Jalen is he's a little bit easier to game plan against for opposing defenses, and that's really it.
Yeah, I think Jalen, he just starts off so quick. He's aggressive right off the bat, and I think that's what he has over Jason Tatum, because he's the cool customer, and he can get hot any minute. So he knows he's gonna get his points, and I think Jaylen Brown just has that mindset, like especially the last game that we played, a guy injured hands and goes right for the steal.
That dunk, man, I was like, oh god, don't.
You're gonna rip your hand open again, but I definitely agree that Jaylen Brown definitely deserves at least to be on one of the teams. I think it's hard for him at the positions like you were saying, but I don't think there's 15 other guys better than Jaylen Brown this year at all.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Mm-hmm.
With you gone, that two guys, yeah, there certainly isn't 15 better players that have had better seasons than Jaylen Brown, no question. He's had an incredible season and has gotten better, and I feel like he's improved on his weaknesses and stuff, even though he still does obviously have weaknesses, but he guy just keeps getting better every year. And
every season.
Exactly, and he certainly did that this year without question, and stuff. So I definitely think it's well deserved for him to get that NBA All NBA team, and it's important too, particularly since he's eligible for that max extension, super max extension, if he does get it, which will certainly be will certainly earned it and be well deserved as well. So yeah, no, it'll be a travesty. Yeah, no question, it'll be a travesty and highway robbery if he doesn't get one of the All NBA teams, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, Jason Tatum, I think he's proven himself, right?
Oh, very much so.
There
are people who are saying he's not like one of the super duper stars. To paraphrase John Hollinger, but
has led in points the last 2 years, so it's like, well,
he made up the term. I don't even know what that means, but he's not a super duper star or whatever that is.
Right.
Sorry, John. I hate you.
Right.
And I think that's where
the title. What does he have to do with?
I think that's where my question, what was headed to next. What does Tatum have to do, to pretty much secure himself as one of the top 3 players in this league in the postseason? Because I feel like the postseason is where players, make a name for themselves, and the guy has been winning at a high level every year he's been in the NBA, and I think this year, he has a lot riding for him on this year's postseason.
It won't be fair, but if they don't win the title, he'll actually take a ding, I think, unless he just encounters just an absolute undeniable force on the other end of the court in the finals, which I don't really see coming out of the West this season. I could be wrong. What I think he needs to do is play like a finals MVP through the rest of the postseason. He's starting a little slow. He was not the best player on the court by a country mile in game 1. And I won't say he's in a slump, right? Because he's putting up good numbers, but I mean, we all know that those aren't the numbers he can put up. And we all have been seeing his shooting hasn't been the most efficient this season, particularly recently. He's been getting better as the end of the season wore on, and he wasn't particularly great, wasn't terrible, I think, in game 1, but he's got to be consistent, right? The energy level has to be consistent. The body language has to be consistent. Even if the shot is not consistent, he has to play like Jimmy Butler plays, because Jimmy Butler wishes he had the talent that Jason Tatum has.
Yeah.
But what Jimmy Butler does have that Jason Tatum doesn't is this indomitable will. And he needs that. If he wants to become one of those players, he doesn't just need the dog in him. He needs to basically be the leader of the pack. He
He's
cannot
two
be.
dogs in
Yeah.
there.
he needs to have
Like,
a whole sled team up in there.
you know, it's like get a
For
body. So you mean to tell me he shouldn't be scoring 5 points in the second half of a game in the playoffs?
He could score 5 points in the second half of the playoff as long as everything else that's happening on the court has his fingerprints on it. You don't have to score to put your name to put your fingerprints on a game. You have to make it your game. Even if your shot just is not going in, there's nothing you can do. You get every rebound, you get every hustle play, you get every block you can, you get in front of every charge. You make that game yours. And he might be too tired. I don't know. Whatever is going on with him, and not like it's a big deal, he's clearly not in the groove yet. Hopefully that'll change in game 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead,
For
Barry.
sure. I was just gonna say a thing that I did like that he did in the first half was, and the thing that he needs to certainly do more is, get downhill. He was getting downhill, getting into the paint, taking advantage of those mismatches. Since there were, undersized, guys that were guarding him that, can't stay in front of him. Let's just call it what it is. So he was, just using that to his size, his advantage, and getting by them and getting into the paint, which definitely want to see, more of that, from him moving forward in game 2 as well as the rest of this postseason, because I feel like that's where he's really, most effective and at his best is, when he first, is being aggressive and getting into the paint and going downhill, and then he can, be able to, hit those perimeter shots, those, side step threes and those fadeaways that he likes to do. That will open up the rest of his game and make it easier for him to be able to make those shots so he can get into a better rhythm, because I feel like he hasn't been getting into the best rhythm that he possibly can, and that's why he hasn't been scoring it as efficient, of a scorer this year. Now, a player who, I like a lot, and I think it's Celtics fans are starting to really like a lot and realize how important he is to this team.
Derek White.
Right. Bingo. You said right before me. Now, what are your, thoughts, on Derek White as far as the season that he's had, and, just how important is he to, this team's run to a champion, because he had a great game 1 and he's played really well this year, and he's done a lot of really great things, for this team. So I just kind of want to hear from you on, what are your thoughts on D. White?
Let me back up just a second on your points about Jason Tatum. I couldn't agree with him more because he sets the tone, right? Jalen has been setting the tone, but he's expected to set the tone as well with him. And the energy level and the focus are important, but also good Mazzola ball, as we call it on the Celtics Lab podcast, is when there's paint touches, is when people cut to the basket instead of pass it around the perimeter. Even when they're doing it like almost magically, they got to get into the paint, particularly against this Atlanta Hawks team. So I think that is super important. I very much agree. And it'll probably get him going for the rest of the playoffs if he gets that going too. So,
right.
But connected to that and complementing that has been this ascension of Derek White and the team's offense in particular. He's always been a fantastic defender, even when he was kind of struggling to figure out what his role was going to be last season. It's very clear from what Pop has said, from what we have seen, that he is a guy who needs to be comfortable in his role to be effective, and he was not last season. I remember him torching the Celtics in games when he played for San Antonio, only to see him come over here and be a really good defender, but not a very good offensive player, at least overall, compared to like the kind of team he was on at the moment. The Spurs were not exactly a contending team when he left them. So I was a little bit concerned. I always thought it was going to be a good deal. I was not one of the people who were, calling it a disaster, as that was famously called. But his ability to be so aggressive, particularly against mismatches, as we saw against Trae Young and even DeJounte Murray, has been nothing short of a revelation in terms of like, if he had been playing like this consistently through the entire season, he might have snuck into All-Star. He's been playing so good lately. And it will be very, very hard for opposing teams to stop the Celtics if those three are on the court together, because one might slump, two might slump, but if three are slumping, then the basketball gods are just pissed and there's nothing you can do. So, particularly with Rob, well, let me take that back. Until game one, Rob not quite looking like himself. I thought that was a particularly interesting development as the regular season wore down. But then, and we should probably talk about it a little bit. I want to get your opinion on what you guys think from what you saw from Rob, because like when he blocked that shot and then just was like scoop pass.
That was amazing.
What? That
was spectacular. That was incredible. Yeah, no, that's my goodness. Like I
didn't play like that the whole game.
Blown away by that. That was mind blowing. Like we've seen Rob do some special things and and make some really great plays, but that's certainly one of the top, if not the top play that he's made, and that was awfully impressive to see him do that. And like you said, Doctor, like that's how you kind of knew he's back. Time Lord is.
So you think he is? I'm worried because there's been a couple flashes in the regular season where like, oh yeah, he's back, and then like this is game, knee injury or what do they call it? Knee injury maintenance or something. I can't remember what they call it on the injury report, but it's very cryptic and it doesn't make you feel better about him missing a game.
Well, I think it's just trying to load manage him and make sure that he gets the rest that he needs, and make sure that he those injuries don't get too severe and too serious once the postseason comes, because you certainly don't want to continue to see him miss a lot of games once you get to the postseason like last year because of the knee injury. So I think they wanted to be careful, be cautious and not play him as much during the regular season, and I feel like his minutes were restricted. He didn't play as much as he could have, because of they want to keep him fresh and keep him as healthy as he can be during the postseason. So I can definitely see and understand why they did that with Rob, and why he sometimes looked really good and then sometimes didn't really look
kind of just
as
present.
Good. But I certainly have, as of right now, crossing the fingers, I have a good feeling that
I'll cross my arms too if I have to.
Yeah, that's true. That definitely say a prayer or two too, that we'll continue to see this version of Rob Williams that we saw in game one on Saturday. We'll see a lot more of that as this postseason goes along. Moving forward for this team, I feel pretty good in saying that it's the kind of Rob Williams that we're going to see more on the floor moving forward.
I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, I think the team, Rob goes, I know we have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. They're going to do their thing night in and night out. But I think, having Rob at his best when the time is needed is what's most important. I feel like, I did notice that he came off the bench first.
Yep. I think it's the best role for him though, because otherwise you got to sit Derek.
Exactly.
Big has not been so great this season.
Right. They really haven't played their last year's starting lineup much. I wonder if they're just waiting for the perfect opportunity to put those guys out there together, and have them going up again. But I think if we can keep it, on the back burner for a while and have Rob not play too many minutes and keep preserving him, because I feel like that's what Joe Mazzulla was doing pretty much all year. Sometimes
I thought so too, but I thought I was being like a giant homer, because usually when a guy can't, they can't.
Yeah.
Not won't.
Right. I feel like the media has been asking Rob about his minutes, and he's always said, as long as we're winning, I'm good. And I think Mazzulla knows how important Rob is. So I think he's just trying to be strategic. Hopefully that's the case, because when Rob goes out there, he doesn't look like he has any issues.
No,
Case in point,
not recently.
that block and rebound. It's like you can't teach that.
That block, rebound, and pass. Let's not shortchange the man.
You
It was
really
all just
can't
like
teach that.
boom.
And we've seen Rob shoot the ball sometimes, and it's like, where the hell did that come from? So I think Rob is comfortable and back to himself, but I feel like the plan to maintain him throughout the postseason, I think, is the most important thing here.
Sidebar, I want to see more of that jumper. His form looks good. It looks like something you
Yes.
can do. I don't expect 3-pointers, but if he can hit some mid-range shots away from the post,
Right.
probably.
Not only when he absolutely has to, because I feel like a few times we've seen it's like, all right, that's the last thing. Because I know Rob likes to pass a lot too. He'll pass out of anything and go get a lob. But I think
just like the tip pass that Bill Russell used to do back in the day, which makes me very, very happy.
Right. I think my last question has to do with the Hawks. Is Quinn Snyder, who replaced Nate McMillan, during the season, has brought these guys up to this point. Had a victory over the Heat to get us in the first series, which I'm very thankful about because I did not want to.
Yeah.
Play Miami.
Ask the Bucks.
All you have to do is see the game that they just played, and
it's like Jesus Christ. So I was very relieved when I seen that. With that said, Quinn Snyder, he's the head coach now. Usually people talk about how a coach can win you a playoff game. Mostly it's the players doing the work, but the coach can scheme you a win every now and then. What do you think Quinn has to do with his team to try and actually make this game more competitive or at least get a win?
He's got to get them to be more physical on defense. They are not equipped defensively to stop the Celtics, but they need to find a way to junk it up, to borrow from Miami Heat's lexicon, because it was very, very clear in game one that the strategy that they used against the Heat, just out rebounding the crap out of the Celtics, just wasn't going to work. They went small, basically made life impossible for them in that regard, and still team rebounded enough to stay, right there with them. So for me, if Quinn is going to get them to actually be able to steal a game, it's probably going to be game 3 or 4 on their home court, and it's probably going to be when he can get them really amped up with all the ambient, aids of like music and crowd yelling their heads off and all that good stuff kind of in their corner that you don't really have when you're the visiting team. I think if he can get them, like I said, they don't have the personnel to just like put the clamps on Boston, but if they can slow them down enough so that way they have to rely on something besides their perimeter game, then I think there's a good chance that as long as they're hitting their shots, they're making, like good attempts at the basket, rather than a lot of what we were seeing in game 1, then I think there's a chance they can steal a game. I think it's more likely than not they steal one game, but it really depends on whether or not that team can get it together, because it's been leaking out a little bit, but everybody on that team does not like each other, and one person in particular is rumored to be particularly difficult with Trae Young, and it's not clear if he likes his new coach yet. And I think if any changes come in, it's going to be Trae who ends up changing. So are those problems settled in and not going away? Or is this kind of like a probatory period where they're going to see like what kind of team they can be under him? I think that is going to be really the real difference between whether they can steal a game or not.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yes, I did have one last question for you, Doctor. Just wanted to ask you, how far do you think this Celtics can go? And if they do get back in the finals, what's the toughest, team, the biggest threat that you see, in the Western Conference, if they do end up meeting, that team ends up meeting the Celtics in the finals? What do you see on that?
So in terms of the biggest threat from the Western Conference, I think would be the Denver Nuggets. They are the only team that didn't drop a game, as far as I'm aware, in the game ones in the West. They look like a team that should be competing for a championship. Finally, I think they have a lot of baggage that isn't really appropriate for the team they have this season compared to how they played in the playoffs in the past. So I'm pretty sure that it's going to be Denver coming out of the West. There's a small chance in my mind that if they can figure out how to gel together in time, which is really harder to do than I think people realize, the Phoenix Suns could be a real threat. But I mean, like, just from the highlights that I saw, they weren't using Kevin Durant particularly effectively in game one. For that series, I didn't watch the whole game, so I could be full of it for all I know. But from what I saw, it wasn't particularly promising. So if they can figure it out, then maybe the Suns might overtake them. But I think it's going to be the Nuggets. And then, I think there isn't a team in the league this season that can definitely, easily, no questions asked, beat the Celtics. And I would be more inclined on a case-by-case basis to bet in favor of the Celtics versus any team in the playoffs right now in either conference. But we have seen in the past, and we saw hints of it in game one, that they haven't quite exercised those demons of playing consistently against teams they think they're going to beat. And with me saying that they should beat every other team in the playoffs, they must be thinking that, because, to be an NBA player, you have to have a way higher confidence about what you can do than I have in what they can do, right? Mm-hmm. So if they are still thinking that way, the biggest obstacle to the Boston Celtics winning Banner 18 may be themselves.
It's a very good point. And that's not the first time we've heard that, John. We've had other people, Celtics people come on here and say that on this podcast. So, no, in which I certainly agree with that. That is a big fact and the truth for sure. They're, their biggest opponent, no question about it, for sure. If they can cut down those turnovers and not play sloppy and not, jack up those threes that, they tend to do at times, especially when they're not falling and don't get in their own way.
I don't see why the clock with like 5-10 minutes left.
Right. Right. I don't see them not only not getting back to the bounds. I don't see why they can win the title if they don't get in their own way and they can consistently perform at a high level on both ends of the floor, night in and night out.
Yeah,
I think they can. I think it's more likely than not they're going to be the champions this season, but you got to play the games.
Yeah, Joe Mazzulla got to come up with a good last shot package too, because I've been a little worried about that right there.
He knows a guy. He knows a guy. He's kind of famous for it. It's his boss.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, remember last game we were watching Barry?
It's the same damn play at the end of every game.
Well, with the last shot Jason Tatum took.
Against the Sixers.
Yeah. It was like,
it's it. Away. Right.
Yeah. It's like, man, we got to do better than that. I think you're absolutely right. He does have, a guy that's famous for doing that kind of stuff in his corner. So, hopefully, I know that they'll get it together, and hopefully, the predictions of them ending up in the finals comes true. But Doc, it's been a real pleasure. Go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, now we'll say this, John, one last thing before we close it out, that if the Celtics don't win the championship this year, it won't be because of Joe Mazzulla. I
don't think so.
Wholeheartedly believe that, that he won't be the one that keeps, the Celtics from, winning the championship and getting Banner 18.
If Ime Udoka's bedside manner wasn't enough to get them to play the right way as much as they need to win a title, no one is going to be able to do that. They need to do it themselves at this point. So, Joe is an offensive wizard and quietly very, very good at organizing defenses. So between that and the talent that is already on this team, which is, like, let's be honest, their bench is as good as some of the playoff teams in this postseason.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no question. I'd even say they have the best bench in the league. I think you could really make the case in an argument this year. No doubt, without a question. I think they certainly have, the best.
There were some questions about the Clippers, but Yeah.
And a guy we didn't even talk about is Malcolm Brogdon, who was quiet in game one and didn't really do too much in game one. And he's, a 6th Man of the Year candidate and finalist. And
Finalist, yeah.
We didn't really even mention him on the show until now. That's how deep and good this team is and how good this bench is that, they just have guys that can be able to come in and step up and contribute, and on any given night at any given game, a guy can step in and score, 20, 25, even 30, if the starters aren't, are starting out slow. If they're having a bad game, there's other guys that can, pick them up and, and rise to the occasion.
Yes, sir. With that being said, Doc, it's been a pleasure having you on this show. Thanks for your advice and your great knowledge of the game. You're always welcome to come back on here, man. Give us a chance to have a doctor on this show twice. So
definitely. Definitely.
You what time is it where you're at?
What's that?
What time is it where you're at right now? Is it the same?
It is 6:12 because we got rid of daylight savings time, which I hate because I'm used to being an hour behind y'all, and it's a pain.
we're 2 hours behind. We're 2 hours ahead. It's 8:12 now, so hopefully you can go out there, man, and catch some good weather. Again, you're more than welcome to come back on the show anytime you feel like it, man.
Just let me know.
Yes, sir. We appreciate you, man. Have a good
day. Yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on. It was great being here. Great talking Celtics hoops with you. And hope you enjoy the rest of the Celtics playoffs.
Likewise, man.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Yeah. You have a good night. Take care.
Yes, sir. So that was great, Justin. Well, Doctor.
Doctor, don't forget about
Quinn.
Doctor.
Can't forget the doctor.
Put some respect on his name. Right.
He writes for the USA Today's Celtics Wire, man. So this guy's doing his thing, living in New Mexico City, and still has time to come on a show like this. And make sure you guys follow him on social media platform, and make sure you're following us as well. We're at ProFan Sports on everything except for Instagram, and that's at ProFans_sports. If you're still watching, we appreciate the support. Make sure you clicking that black button. We need those subscribers. That's the best way to support the show. So until next time, man, we out of here.
Have a good week, everyone. See y'all next week.